Do you understand the ever-increasing importance of self-development on the modern battlefield? Stay with us, for that's what we'll be discussing on this episode of the Evolving Warfighter. Welcome back to the Evolving Warfighter. My name is Dr. Franklin Annis, and today I want to talk to you about the increasing strategic importance to the concept of self-development. We have arrived at a point of time in history where the skills, abilities, and knowledge required of a soldier on the battlefield may exceed the training time that were allotted with that soldier. The speed and technology available on the modern battlefield now may require skills, knowledge, and abilities of our soldiers that we simply do not have enough time in our allotted training time to teach our soldiers. As this occurs, the art of self-directed learning, or what the Army calls self-development, may increase strategically in its importance. It may be the one skill that allows U.S. soldiers to maintain their dominance on the modern battlefield. Today we're going to begin by the examination of the levels of war. In traditional conflicts that have occurred in the past, say World War II for example, 70, 80 years ago, there were certain types of officers that focused on certain levels of war. The company-grade officers were mainly focused on the tactical level of war. How do you fight a battle? As they moved up, received additional education and training, they became field-grade officers and they were prepared to work on an operational level of warfare. How do you run the campaign? For those that were lucky enough and proved their abilities, they were selected, promoted to generals, and they became heavily involved in the strategic level of warfare. How do you win the war, find peace, bring your troops back home? However, with modern warfare and the speed of modern media, lower level officers are engaging in strategic level decision making on the modern battlefield. It's been noted by several scholars that lieutenants in the modern wars of Iraq and Afghanistan held as much authority and responsibility of field-grade officers back in World War II. Unlike previous generations of officers that had their whole entire career to learn the various levels of war and how to operate inside of them, the modern battlefield demands that we can press this type of training and education so that we can allow even our junior officers to have knowledge of strategic concepts and how to implement them on the battlefield. I'll give you a couple examples of the strategic impact of perception management. With modern technology such as a smartphone or compact digitally recording devices and platforms on the internet to share this type of information such as YouTube, Facebook, and other related sites, controlling the image on the battlefield or perception of American soldiers has become increasingly important. I'll give you a negative example of this, such as Marines urinating on the bodies of dead insurgents. Unlike World War II, where the media was censored, or if negative photos did make it to the general population, they were several months removed from the actual event, and therefore removing some of the significance of the outrage. On the modern battlefield, negative images can go around the world in a matter of hours. This can have significant impact on our strategic goals, in terms of borrowing a term from Clausewitz, trying to win the hearts and minds of the populace. It's very difficult to portray the U.S. military as a noble and honorable force intent on doing good when you have images such as Marines urinating on a body. To give you a positive example, the picture here of this medical provider holding an injured child significantly advances our strategic goals, demonstrating the U.S. military is caring, kind, cares about the civilian population, and is not targeting civilians in any way, and is really there to only target the enemy combatants and help the civilian population. So we must be ever mindful that any actions our soldiers take on the modern battlefield could be recorded and could have a significant impact on our strategic objectives within hours on the world stage. One theory I really like to explain the strategic complexities of the modern warfare is Marine General retired Krulak's concept of a three-block war and the correlating strategic corporal. General Krulak believed in this concept of a three-block war. At any given time in any city on the modern battlefield, we could have simultaneous operations. These operations might include humanitarian missions, peacekeeping missions, and mid-intensity combat. As a Marine traveled across the city, they had to recognize what specific block of the battlefield they were in terms of what operation, and then apply the force appropriate for that block of warfare. Here's a list of skills and ability that General Krulak believed that his Marines needed to be a strategic corporal. You can see many of these skills may take a significant amount of time to gain and could change rapidly and had to be relearned if a Marine was shifted from one theater operation to another. While General Krulak primarily applied his theory to the enlisted corps, I would suggest that we need to mirror his thoughts onto the officer corps. We need to create strategic lieutenants. Here's a list of skills that may be required of strategic lieutenants that may not have been required in junior officers in previous wars. In other words, the concept of finding and fixing and destroying the enemy by any means possible is not a realistic goal on the modern battlefield. We must use force proportionally to achieve our goals. One example I used to use for this when training ROTC cadets was talking about arriving at a mountaintop village. As you sit down, you do your sector sketch, there's one bridge that leads into the city. And this might be a natural point to put a reference point for indirect fire on. Say sometime in the middle of the night, insurgents come to the village to attack the village. You notice the insurgents are on the bridge, you have the reference point to the bridge, what do? And if the answer is call for indirect fire, you may be incorrect. Because if you're killing, say, half a dozen insurgents with light rifles, but you're doing so at the cost of the only way in and out of the village, you may have more of a negative strategic impact on the village than you did an actual tactical advantage on the enemy. Therefore, modern soldiers have to realize what level of force they have to apply in each block of warfare to achieve the strategic goals of that campaign. And that might include not engaging the enemy or engaging the enemy with limited force to prevent negative strategic impacts from harming or destroying more than what can be achieved in their tactical objective. It should become fairly obvious when we attempt to apply the concepts of a strategic corporal or a strategic lieutenant that it is impossible to train our soldiers with the limited time we have for training and education on all the possible tasks that they may be asked to perform on the modern battlefield. As a result, the demand for self-development skills or self-directed learning among our soldiers is ever increasing. Given the importance and strategic level impact of having the skills of a strategic corporal or a strategic lieutenant might have on the modern battlefield, it demands that we have a good, solid concept and supporting material for the concept of self-development. Modern soldiers need to be master learners if they wish to dominate the modern battlefield. While it may be near impossible to attempt to train all soldiers in all possible outcomes on the battlefield, it may be incredibly fruitful if we taught them and developed them in the skills of their own self-directed learning. As a result, soldiers that arrived on the battlefield could assess their own weaknesses, determine the needs of the mission, identify resources, and quickly learn the information they need and control all three levels of warfare, from tactical, operational, and strategic. As the speed and technology ever increases on the modern battlefield, the warrior of the future may depend more on the skill of self-development than a set number of warrior tasks and abilities. As military leaders, we need to ensure that our soldiers have a good concept of self-development and understand the steps to develop themselves, to gather the information they need to meet any challenge on the modern battlefield. So I challenge you to make sure that your soldiers have an understanding of a strategic corporal and a strategic lieutenant concept. I also challenge you to make sure that they know that their minute-to-minute actions on the modern battlefield and what they do on their daily activities can have a vast strategic impact on the goals of the U.S. military and national security. Please ensure that your soldiers have a good concept of self-development and they become well practiced in this activity. Thank you for watching this video. For more videos on the topic of self-development, I encourage you to subscribe to the Evolving Warfighter. Until I see you again, remember to continue to focus on your self-development so we can ensure that we can dominate the modern battlefield.